dominated the conversation so much of this weekend, and it all stemmed from this scene that we saw at Wake Forest on Saturday night in a game that you watched on ESPN as the Deacons upset 8th-ranked Duke, although to call it an upset is a bit of a misstatement because they were actually favored to win the game. One way or another, Duke's star player, Kyle Filipowski, injured his knee in a collision with a fan, and as you see here, he required some assistance getting through the chaos into the locker room, and it goes without saying that this is a terrible set of circumstances. Filipowski had a variety of post-game comments in which he said, among other things, this has got to change. And it's a topic that comes up from time to time, and to the everlasting credit of our friend Jay Bilas, who joins our conversation now. Jay is one of those people who talks about this even on the days it hasn't just happened the day before, but he was doing the game the other night. And of course, Austin Rivers jumps in here with us as well. Austin played at Duke. It feels like practically every time a court is stormed, it is because Duke lost. Monica McNutt in the conversation with us, and D. Wood is with us as well. I'm just saying, I mean, that's the people storm the court because Duke is Duke and they beat you. And then here's Damien Woody. I wanted him in the conversation because this happens in football too. And we see images that could potentially be dangerous. And there's part of it that is fun and exciting and wonderful. And then there is the other side of it where Kyle Filipowski, the best player on one of the best teams in the country, may be injured. So, Jay Bilas, I'll start with you. Again, you were there. You've been talking about this for years. What are your top-line thoughts on this morning?
Well, I mean, it goes back to what I've been saying all this time. It's fans don't belong on the court, and fans may not want to hear that, but it's true. And while this does happen in college, it doesn't happen in the NFL. It doesn't happen in the NBA or Major League Baseball. And it's easy to stop. But the truth is, Greeny, I mean, I'm happy to talk about this with you, but it's really kind of pointless because it's not going to stop. The NCAA doesn't want it to stop. And by the NCAA, I mean the member institutions. They like it. They like the visual. They take pictures of it. They put it up all throughout their institution in their locker rooms. They use it in recruiting. And the truth is, like, the media has to take some accountability here, too. We like it, too. We put it at the end of every highlight. We tacitly encourage it. And when South Carolina won a big game earlier this year, the president emeritus of the university ran out onto the court and bragged about it on social media. And all these institutions say, we're happy to pay the fine. They're happy to pay the fine for that visual. And it could all stop tomorrow. You know, you hear administrators say, look, it's too difficult, it's problematic to stop fans from rushing the court. Well, they don't have to stop them. All they have to do is don't let them off the court. You can ring the court, there's law enforcement there, detain everyone, give them either criminal citations or arrest them. And it all stops tomorrow. But they don't want to do it. They like it. They like it.
Austin, let me come to you again. You played at Duke. I don't off the top of my head recall it, but there must have been games in which your team lost a road game and people did this. Can you describe what it's like? I mean, when you're on the court and all of a sudden just a seemingly never-ending stream of strangers are just racing out there into your face. And what is the actual experience like?
Yeah, it's never fun, especially when you're on the other side of that. We actually lost a game versus Temple in which they stormed the court. And when that's happening, the first thing you're thinking is, I just want to get out of here before I come face to face with the fan. You got to think, we're talking about young men here. These aren't grown individuals. So, and neither are the kids rushing the floor. When you have that mixing, especially on the other side, you look at, say, a player for Duke. This is a kid who just had a loss. Emotions are high. It's a bad combination of things that could possibly happen. There's nothing good that can come of it other than a picture that's being taken, or the kids jumping up and down in the court. The fact that we haven't had more injuries in the past is actually even more strange, just considering you have a bunch of fans steamrolling each other, running onto the court while the other players are trying to get off the court. It is scary, just because you don't know who you're going to run into, and fans things as they run by you, celebrating their win. It is a very dangerous thing. The answer to it, I don't know. It'd be very hard to, I agree with Jay. They don't belong in the court, just like we don't belong in the stands. I don't know how you fix it, and I don't know how you could arrest so many kids. I mean, there are hundreds of them. But something does have to change because it's just not safe.
Monica, what do you think of all this?
So I guess I'll be accountable media here. I don't have an issue with it, and I certainly hope that Filipowski is not injured intensely, but I do think that this is a part of college sports. And I think there's room to address maybe how it's done. I don't know. In my mind, like maybe there's one side that kids come from so that the away team has a chance to get off the floor. There's all these tweaks that I would hope may be something that could be explored before it was completely eliminated.
So Seth Greenberg, who's going to join us later this morning, was going to point out that there is exactly that when he was at Virginia Tech, for example, they had plans in place for how the players were going to safely exit. And I've heard Coach K, Jay, talk about this in the past, that they had an area where players were going to go. But in this particular case, the game was still, I mean, it really was over. There was 1 second left, but the players were still on the floor. It's one thing if the players are on their bench, they can probably get off pretty quickly. But there are going to be players on the floor until the buzzer hits 0, that regardless of who the players are. In this case, it happens to be the star of the team. D. Wood, we see it in football, of course, all the time. We see the same kind of images where, you know, by the time we're 60 seconds removed from the end of a big college football game, that field is completely saturated with people. What is your take on all this?
Yeah, I mean, listen, first of all, that imagery is never going to change because it sells. That's number one. But I do agree that I don't think it's a bad mix, in my opinion, because as Austin talks about, like in the sport that I play in, football, it's such an emotional game, okay? And so when you lose a game like that, I know in the pros, like, it's hard for me to contain my emotions after a loss because you just feel it so bad. And remember, we have like, you know, before the media even meets with you, you have like a buffer time just so you can just so you can decompress.
Right.
So now, you know, I can't even imagine like a college athlete where you know immediately you lose a heartbreaking game and the fans come storming on the field, someone hits you. Then that's to me that's a combustible moment right there where something bad happened. We brought it up in the meeting this morning. LeGarrette Blount, know, when he played at the University of Oregon, where he threw a punch at a fan. So I don't like it, but it's not going to change.
Which is keep the people off the court. If you want, you can tell the it's not that complicated. I was a student once, and I went to Northwestern, and we beat Indiana when they were the national champs, and I think I might have been the first person who ran out onto the court. But if I had been told, when the game is over, there's a ring of security, we'll let you know when you're allowed out there, but there's going to be a period of time where the players are allowed to get off the court, and then if you want everyone to be allowed to go run out there, give it 30 seconds or whatever it is, then go ahead. And if you go through that security, there will be consequences, whether they are legal consequences or, you know, school suspensions or whatever it is. If you want the fans to be allowed on the court, I don't have an issue with that, so long as it does not jeopardize the safety of the people who actually belong on the court. So, Jay, to me it seems to be a fairly simple situation where you say, let the players get off, and then if you want everyone to come on, they can come on. Is there something I'm missing? Does that not just make sense?
It makes sense, but we're trying to plan something that we've thought has been spontaneous all these years. And, we just have a problem here. Look, to Austin's earlier point about things not happening in the past, and that's a miracle, there have been serious injuries that have occurred in the past, especially to fans. It's a dangerous condition and a dangerous situation. And what happened at the Wake Forest Duke game was not only foreseeable, it was predictable and inevitable. And something worse is going to happen in the future. And we showed a lot of that in slow motion. That didn't happen in slow motion. So when you have a bunch of people running, if you're Kyle Filipowski, you have a bunch of people running at you, the first thing you're thinking of is protect yourself. And that's combustible. Look, it's a dangerous condition. The first thing the NCAA and all these ADs and all that, they talk about player safety. Do they really care about player safety if we're doing this? And Austin may remember this, because you mentioned Duke oftentimes, is subject to court storming games. There have been times when the coaches have sent the majority of the team off the floor before the end of the game.
Right.
And they just leave the 5 players out there to mop up. And is that what we want? It's clearly not. Look, fans are part of the atmosphere. They're great. The games wouldn't exist without fans. It's terrific. They do not belong on the field. They do not belong on the court. And certainly they don't belong there when the players are there. It's wrong. And if the NCAA doesn't admit that it's wrong, It's so contradictory to the message they send about, oh, players are number one and player safety is number one. That's clearly not true based upon their behavior.
Go ahead, Austin.
And I was going to say there is a reason why it also doesn't happen in sports. If a whole bunch of fans rushed, the court in the NBA game, one of them would probably get punched. It's just the reality of what it is. The reason we do this is a college thing. This is a kid's thing. And now we're sitting here trying to organize chaos. It's something that's very difficult to do. Again, this is a high emotional thing, especially in college. You have the spirit. People have a lot of pride in their alumni. People have a lot of pride in their schools. I think it's part of the experience for the kids to run on the court while the opposing team's still down there. They want to run past these people and say something to them. I wish there's also a standard for when we rush the court. Rushing the court after you were favored to win is kind of funny to me, but I get it. You beat a Duke, you beat a Kentucky or Kansas, one of the Blue Bloods. You're probably going to have the court storm. This is just, for me, it's an issue when you have thousands of people running to the court while you're trying to have your athletes leave the court safely. I know it's a part of the sport, but the question is, should it be? And we haven't had that many issues in the past. Maybe we have some, Jay has pointed to, but I don't like this at all. And this has nothing to do with it being a Duke thing. This has to do with the college athlete thing and what's good for their safety.
So, listen, I get it. And I think we all agree that it's maybe not the best formula, but the only option moving forward that it seems that we all can probably agree on is to attempt to organize this chaos. For whatever reason, we have all agreed that it is probably unlikely to change. And so how do you do your best to mitigate risk? Of course, it's not ideal. It is absolutely not ideal. But if Jay's solution is to be taken seriously, I almost think that would cause more of an issue at the idea of parents seeing their kids facing criminal charges over something like this. I get it in terms of it needing to be taken that seriously. I think we all agree it probably will not be taken that seriously. But then I think you tap into a whole nother set of donors and folks that are going to be like, wait, what, you're going to do X, Y, Z to these young people for being enthusiastic? So listen, the best thing in my mind moving forward is to do the best you can to attempt to organize this chaos if it is not going anywhere.
D. Wood, you got a final word?
Yeah. Again, I'm just going to follow up in a highly emotional point. In that moment, I just think fans and players, it's a bad mix, especially when you're talking about, young women and young men in that moment. I just think it's a bad mix.
Yeah, and let's very quickly, because it should not go unaddressed, let's address the stupidest among us, the people who are on social media after Caitlin Clark got knocked down or after Kyle Filipowski gets knocked down, blaming them, suggesting that they're flopping or something like that. These are people who belong where they are, who are being run into or whatever the case may be by people who absolutely do not belong where they are. Like this moment, for example, people suggesting, oh, Caitlin Clark was faking that to make it look worse than it were. Shut up. And if you're pointing at that Kyle Filipowski looks like he was being aggressive, you know what? If I'm where I'm supposed to be and you could, well, I'm a bad example of this. If you're where you're supposed to be and someone has come running at you and you have no idea what their intentions are, you're going to do exactly what he did also. So if you are one of these absolute morons on social media who are suggesting this was Kyle Filipowski's fault, or instigating whatever it is that happened with this kid who went running out onto the court after him, just be aware that you are an idiot and everyone around you knows you are an idiot. So that just needed to be said once, and then we'll go from there. All right, I'll